Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Public Interest. I'm Ravi Kapur. We're joined by Tulsi Gabbard, the former presidential candidate, a former member of Congress, who's got a new book out, and we had a chance to sit down and speak earlier before this conversation in Silicon Valley. It's really great to see you once again.
Nice to see you again.
Tulsi, we had a great conversation a few years ago, but so much has changed, and really I've been following your career since you began, kind of labeled as a progressive Democrat when you first came onto the scene, and the first Hindu American ever elected into Congress. And you've transitioned now to an independent, and your story is fascinating on so many levels, because here you were touted as perhaps a potential leading person in the Democratic Party, as the vice chair of the Democratic Party, to now renouncing your affiliation with the Democratic Party. And ostensibly, as many people are saying, you may be someone considered by President Trump to be his running mate or be in his cabinet. So just tell us first about that transition. How do you go from being someone integrally involved with the Democratic Party to someone that's now independent and potentially aligning with the Republican Party?
You know, it's a sad but very simple story. The Democratic Party that I joined over 20 years ago is completely unrecognizable. You've heard this saying over and over from different people over different generations, people like Ronald Reagan, who used to be a Democrat, and others, when they say that I didn't leave the party left me. The party that I joined over 20 years ago, I was 21 years old in Hawaii, running for state house on issues related to protecting the environment, conservation, and clean water. And I had to choose a party. And I chose the Democratic Party because what I saw was a party that defended free speech. It was a big open tent party that welcomed people from all different religions, ideas, backgrounds, ethnicities, and really encouraged the kind of open marketplace of ideas that is the hallmark of our democracy. It was the party of the little guy, the party that fought for working men and women across our country. You fast forward to where we are now, and today's leadership of the Democrat Party, which is the Democrat elite. Every one of those things that drew me to the Democratic Party over 20 years ago are the things that caused me to leave, because the Democrat Party of today no longer stands for free speech. They are undermining our right to express ourselves and squashing this open marketplace of ideas. They are undermining our own democracy right here at home, trying to take away our right to vote for the candidate of our choosing, undermining the rule of law, representing the interests of special interests over the interests of the everyday American. And most dangerously, when it comes to our foreign policy, have led us to the brink of World War III and potentially nuclear Armageddon. For these and so many other reasons, I just couldn't associate myself with today's Democrat Party that is not only not representative of the interests of the American people. There are a lot of Democrats who I hear from or meet almost on a daily basis who have either already walked that same journey that I did or who are doing it as we speak and leaving the Democrat Party behind.
Do you feel like you're persona non grata by the Democratic Party? I mean, you built these relationships over many years. You were a sitting member of Congress. You were someone that they were highlighting. And now here we are. I mean, frankly, I had dinner the other night and your name came up. And it was, I could tell this lady's politics immediately, because she was like, oh, Tulsi Gabbard. It seemed as if your rep amongst Democratic circles, maybe mainstream media circles, has been dinged a bit. I mean, give me your perspective on that. What is it like to go from perhaps being a media darling at some point to now folks definitely take shots at you?
I think it says more about the Washington establishment than it does about me. There are a few friends that I have still in Washington, people who I've been friends with when I got elected to Congress and throughout. But our friendship was based on not on the political gamesmanship that goes on in Washington, but just based on who we are as people. When you get the kind of reactions that you're getting from people in Washington, whether they be in politics or the media, it is a reaction that comes from those who live in a bubble in Washington and who are wildly out of touch with the reality that everyday Americans are living and facing across the country. These are people who care more about what they think of each other and the popularity contests that exist in Washington, rather than actually caring about truth, freedom, and what's in the best interest of the safety, security, and freedom of the American people. So yeah, there are a lot of friends who I've had who haven't spoken to me in years. You know, I've always been an independent-minded person. This shift in how the Democrat elite in Washington viewed me, as you pointed out in the beginning, unbeknownst to me why or how, but I was touted as a rising star in the Democratic Party when I was first elected. But the reality is, and this is what I get into in detail in my book, which is called For Love of Country, how that shifted even throughout the 8 years that I was in Congress and when I ran for president, because I wasn't willing to go along to get along. I wasn't going to just toe the party line because somebody told me to. I went to Congress in order to serve my constituents in Hawaii and to serve our country and to actually make an impact. And so because I didn't vote blue no matter who, or toe the party line no matter what they said, that's a problem for some of those people in Washington. And what we are seeing now is even back then, I wasn't the only Democrat who was doing it. But when you look now, especially on issues related to foreign policy and some others, the Democrat elite in Washington is almost in total lockstep and demanding total compliance and conformity, which again stands against the very concept of freedom and having this open marketplace of ideas.
So you were one of the very few Democrats that met with President Trump during that transition period.
Back in 2016.
Yes,
that's right.
Indeed. So tell me about where you stand today. There's a lot of folks who supported you as a Democrat. At the same time, a lot of folks perhaps were potentially hesitant to embrace your campaign because it did seem like your opportunity to winning up against Hillary Clinton was unlikely. So
my opportunity to win
that the election in 2020, I guess, after Hillary Clinton took shots at you and the Democratic Party basically took shots at you. So tell me where you are planning to be politically. Is an interest in running a national office something you'd be considering once again? What's your future hold?
That's a good question. My interest is in being where I can make the most impact and best be of service to our country. I don't know yet where that'll be or what that will look like, but it's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. You know, I'm not on a ballot this year. I'm not running for office, but I am doing my very best to try to reach out to as many Americans as possible, to share my own experiences, to speak the truth at a time where there's a lot of propaganda being thrown around, so that we, the people, can make sure that we take action and defend our democracy and defend freedom in this upcoming election on November 5th.
So I meet a lot of people on the left and right who choose not to get into public service, maybe for many reasons like what you've experienced.
Yeah.
Your reputation gets tarnished for whatever reason. I think you're likely the same person you were when you entered Congress as you are today,
That's right.
But the world around you has potentially changed. So what do you have to say to those folks who may be listening to your message to say, hey, I would love to contribute publicly, but I am afraid of the downstream ramifications?
It's a sad state of our politics today that is the case. What I encourage people who don't want to run for office, but who want to make a positive impact, they are the ones who should be running for office. It's the people who are chasing power or fame or money as the motivator for why they're running for office that we, the people as voters, should not allow to be in power. Unfortunately, there are too many of them in Washington today, which is why we are seeing this massive disconnect between what goes on in Washington and the reality of our everyday lives across the country. So I encourage those people. I have friends like that too, and people who come up to me. I encourage them to take that step out of an act of service, and knowing that in order to serve and defend this country that we all love and cherish, that it requires some sacrifice, and we have to be willing to make that sacrifice.
Is it fair to say, if with President Trump on the ballot, that you will endorse his candidacy?
I've made very clear that President Biden and the Democrat elite pose a direct threat through their actions that we've already seen. It's not an opinion. They have a track record of how they are trying to undermine our fundamental freedoms and how they have pushed us to the brink of World War III and nuclear war. We need to send a strong message and remove them from office. And anyone who abuses their power and chooses power over freedom, and vote for Donald Trump in this election on November 5th.
And since this election will largely be decided on the margins, how do you talk to the folks, the swing voters, those of us who are truly conflicted, who are saying, what Trump brings to the table, what Biden brings to the table, may not like what either man brings to the table. How do you convince those folks to get engaged in November, and who to vote for?
You know, I encourage people to just look at their record, both of them. This is the first time in our lifetimes that we have two presidents running against each other, both of whom have a 4-year record. I encourage people to look at the things that they care about most for themselves or their families or their community. Whether, border security is a huge issue right now, and it's affecting not only the border states as it has traditionally, it's affecting cities and towns across the country. I was in Montana last week, and small towns and the reservations, they are starting to see the cartels positioning themselves there and the negative impacts of what has been Biden's open border policy. You look at increasing crime in our communities. You look at our education system, how we have more functionally illiterate kids graduating from high school now than we ever have before. You see the erosion of Title IX. Any parent of a daughter, or a son for that matter, sisters, you have a situation where the Biden administration has just said, no, every school will be forced to allow a boy that says, no, I identify as a girl, to compete against your daughter in school sports, taking away a potential opportunity for scholarship or educational opportunities. There are so many issues like these that affect us in our homes and in our schools and in our communities that transcend the usual partisan divide. These are things that are affecting all of us. And when we look at the contrast between President Biden and President Trump on these issues, then the choice becomes very clear.
Finally, you were really the first openly Hindu candidate that I'd ever seen, certainly to that date. There's a few more now, but the reality is you're not Indian American. Mm-hmm. You were very overt about your faith in a country that is non-Hindu. Mm-hmm. So was that a detriment during your campaigns? And can a Hindu American candidate actually win a large national election?
I've never been concerned about, it's never been a political calculation of my choosing to express my faith. The American people are recognize that having a spiritual foundation for this country, as our founders did, is important for us to maintain this moral fabric of our society. This is a country that believes in freedom, and that includes freedom of religion. And I have been welcomed by people of many different faiths into their places of worship, into their homes and their communities, and gathering together often in prayer for each other and for our country and for our future. I encourage people, again, this freedom of religion means your ability to express your own faith, or for those who choose to not believe in God at all, to also share their own expression of their views. That's really what this is about, and why it's so important for us all of us, to be willing to stand together and come together for that very freedom. We cannot take it for granted.
Well, I think you've had one of the most interesting political journeys that I've been able to witness, and we wish you continued success. And thank you so much for sitting down with us.
So nice to see you. Thank you.
Tulsi Gabbard. We'll have more in the public interest in a moment.